Hi everybody, my name is Erin Broadbent. This is my Mod 8 case study for EDL 853. A brief summary of the case study. We have Carl, a third grade student, his classroom teacher, Mrs. Taylor, his SPED teacher, Ms. Green, and we were also told about his previous SPED teacher, Mrs. Lewis. Carl is a third grade student who has an IEP for a behavior disorder. His behaviors have recently begun escalating from self-harm to aggression towards others, specifically his teacher, Mrs. Taylor. Mrs. Taylor wants Carl removed from her classroom due to his behaviors. Ms. Green is following policies and procedures to move forward with the amendment to Carl's IEP. They just recently had his IEP annual meeting and had decided to keep everything the same. Mrs. Taylor is upset that Ms. Green just simply won't remove Carl from her classroom. Category 1, Problem Identification and Analysis. What I know. I know that Carl is a third grade student who has an IEP for behaviors. I know that after the review meeting this year, his behaviors began to increase from self-harm to aggression towards others, especially towards his classroom teacher. I know that Ms. Green is new to the building as well as the profession. I know that Mrs. Taylor wants Carl removed from her classroom. I know that Mrs. Green wants to find the root of Carl's behavior change, and she wants to actually work on his behaviors. I know that Mrs. Green has created a plan of action to take when Carl exhibits an aggressive behavior, and that is to remove him from the classroom. I also know that Carl's parents are divorced. I know it wasn't civil, and it continues to be a source of discomfort and difficulty. The parents can't even get along at a meeting at school. What I need to know. I need to know if Carl ever exhibited any aggressive behaviors last year, or is this completely brand new? I need to know what his relationship was like with his previous classroom teacher and previous SPED teacher. If he never had aggressive behaviors and had really good relationships with them, that could be a really good indication of something to move forward that might help Carl with this year. I'd like to know what Carl's relationship's like with his current classroom teacher and his SPED teacher. I know that his teacher wants him out of the classroom. Does Carl know this as well? I'd like to know what type of support Carl and his parents have outside of school. And I'd like to know what other support Carl has in school. Is there a social worker or counselor in the district that can ever spend time with him? So what's the problem? The problem is Carl's aggressive behavior. It's that Mrs. Taylor wants Carl out of her room. It's that Carl's parents do not get along at all. The problem is also who can work with Carl? Who is there in the building or outside of the building that can help him with these behaviors? Category 2, Proposed Plan of Action with appropriate strategies for implementation. I propose that we provide Carl's family with outside resources for support. Family counseling, family mediation, something that they can do, either all three of them, and also with Carl's siblings, or maybe even just mom and the children, or just dad and the children, if mom and dad still cannot continue to get along. I propose that we explore other district resources, social worker, counselor, school psych. What else is out there that could also spend time with Carl? I think we also need to maybe look at last year's teacher. That might be a good relationship to keep working with and have Carl spend some time with. I'd like to set up a meeting with Mrs. Taylor and Ms. Green to discuss Carl in the classroom and outside of the classroom. I'd like to discuss his behaviors and actions and what exactly warrants him needing to be removed from the classroom. At the meeting, I'd also like to discuss Mrs. Taylor's concerns about last year's SPED teacher and this year's SPED teacher. Everyone does stuff differently, and so I kind of would like to just remind her of that and remind Mrs. Taylor privately of how we conduct ourselves. Making comments to teachers as we leave a parent meeting is not okay and not appropriate. Category 3, resolve the issue based on promoting the success of all students. I would like to continue Mrs. Green's plan for when Carl escalates and remove him from the classroom. I would also like to amend that and add in that if Carl will not leave the room, rather than forcefully removing him, we need to have the other students evacuate the room so they're safe and it's not causing them or Carl any more stress. I would like to provide Carl and his family additional supports. Those are going to help Carl's behavior in the classroom. If we can get some of the family issues resolved, that could help with Carl's aggression. That may very well be what has him so upset. Discussing relationship building will help Carl and Mrs. Taylor, but it also may help other students in Mrs. Taylor's room. Maybe there's other kids that she has not bonded with that may become an issue later on in the year, and that could help them as well. Category 4, debrief thinking. So as I read through this case study, I was thinking several different things. One thing is that this is a real problem. Working as a school counselor, I actually hear a lot of teachers say, get them out of my classroom, I don't want them in my room. I had a teacher just last week say, he's not allowed back in my room for the day. So this thinking from teachers of kicking kids out of their room, it really does happen. Sometimes case studies I don't really feel are all that relatable, but this one I really felt, especially for me, my position, my school, this is a very real problem and a very relatable case study. I also was thinking about the trauma in children. It's so raw and so heartbreaking. Carl has clearly had trauma in his life. And simply by the very short snippet that we got from the parent meeting, you can tell Carl has had trauma, and you can tell that there is just going on between his parents, between, how they treat each other and how they treat the siblings or the children. It's very raw and very heartbreaking that they can't get along in front of their children. And Carl sees that, and he sees how his parents speak to one another and how they can't work together. And I also noticed Carl's dad seemed to put his work before his son and wanted to just hurry up and get back to work. Carl feels that. I would bet money Carl feels that. I also think about how relationships with adults inside school is huge. Carl, it sounds like, doesn't have anyone that he feels like he can really rely on and that is in his corner to take care of him. As I went through the case study, I had several different feelings. I felt sad. I felt sad for Carl that he didn't have anyone on his side. I felt sad that his classroom teacher didn't want him in the classroom. I also felt sad for Mrs. Green. She's new to the position, but also new to the building and district, and she's not having that connection with her colleague and having them respect her and her position. I was feeling frustrated that the teachers could not get along, frustrated that there just didn't seem to be the support and help for Carl that he really needs. I'm also feeling angry as I read through the case study. I'm angry that Carl's put in this position with his parents. I'm angry that they cannot pull it together and get along for the sake of Carl. I'm angry that Mrs. Taylor wants Carl out of her classroom. It appears to me that she has given up very quickly on him, and that makes me sad, frustrated, and angry as well. Debriefing, valuing. I'm really valuing that Mrs. Green's drive to do the right thing for Carl. She's new, she's inexperienced, she's up against an experienced teacher who is telling her what to do, but Mrs. Green really seems to be sticking to her guns, and she's trying to do the right thing for Carl. Valuing the importance of family, related and non-related. Really just the importance of relationships, the family outside of school and relationships inside of school. Was also valuing larger districts, more adults for children to connect to, more people around that can help them and help them work through everything that they may be going through at home and at school. Debrief unresolved issues. Will Carl's family be open to outside counseling or support? Based on what we know, I kind of think Mom will, but Dad won't. But I don't know. Can the district find someone to provide Carl with more support in school? Social worker, counselor, psych, a teacher, his last year's school teacher, who can do like a check-in, check-out with him. I will be interested to know how Carl's going to react when he is removed from the classroom. He's already angry. Is he going to become more angry? And how will that removal affect his behaviors? Will they escalate and he have more outbursts? I'd like to know if Mrs. Taylor is able to even connect with Carl and move past those biases and feelings. Category 5, Component 1. How did I promote the academic success of my students? Removing Carl when he's aggressive allows the other students to work and keeps everyone safe. It also allows the teacher to enhance instruction and continue teaching because the distraction's removed. Finding additional supports for Carl allows him to focus on his academics, and building relationships will help Carl and the other students to focus on academics because it helps them to feel safe at school. Component 2, how am I able to promote the personal well-being of students? Finding additional support for Carl helps him to regulate his emotions, and building the relationships will also help him to regulate emotions. Finding support and building a relationship really go hand in hand for Carl. He's got to get that support to learn how to regulate his emotions, but he needs to feel a connection. Home life is difficult, and so is school. Finding additional support for Carl's family will foster that relationship between home and school. It'll help to open up that communication and show the family that we really care about Carl. Component 3. How can I enhance the instructional capacity? Removing distractions helps students to focus. Providing additional support for Carl so he can focus and work through his current state. Encouraging the homeschool support and connections allows for academic and well-being success for all students. Encouraging positive relationships between the teacher and students allows for academic and well-being success for all students. Thank you for watching.